What's up, guys, and welcome to the 54th Xamarin Android tutorial. So the last video we took a look at frame layouts briefly, and we kind of just went over the gist of them and how they work and what they're good for. So just a refresher, if you're coming back from this video, the previous, what we're going to be working on now that we're comfortable with frame layouts, is this transitioning overlaying toolbar. Okay, so it transitions into a fully visible toolbar from it being fully transparent. And our application, this is the G+ application, of course, and our application is going to do something that's similar to that. And this is what we're going to be working on in this video. All right, so let's get started, and we're going to be using the same project that we were using in the previous video. So this is where we left off in the last video if you haven't checked that out yet. Now, since we've actually gone over Toolbar, I'm not gonna concentrate too much on it. Like I said in the previous video, if you haven't watched anything on the Toolbar, the new Toolbar for the support library 7, go back a few videos, and there will be about 3 videos that go over the Toolbar less briefly than what I'm going to right now, and therefore you'll be able to get caught up to speed with them. All right, so the first thing we're going to need now is we're going to need, of course, the support library to use the new toolbar. So let's go ahead and give the component store a shot. And the reason why I say a shot is that sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. And if not, we'll have to download the DLL file separately. So the one that we want is the 7 app compat. And because the 4 is a dependency, it'll download that as well. So don't worry about getting support library 4 because it will come with it. So it's added the packages. It says 2 packages successfully installed. All right. And there's our 4 and 7 libraries. Extend that out. So that's going to be the packages that are going to be installed. Now, if this doesn't work correctly, you can always just kind of right click on the references themselves, edit references, and then you can always download the DLL files directly and then reference them directly here, which I have done in the past as well. And then, of course, you can get the DLL files from the Xamarin component store. Okay, so but now that we have the toolbar, let's go ahead and let's create our XML file that's going to hold the toolbar and the scroll bar that you saw a few moments ago. And that's going to be here in this file that we were working with the frame layout with. Let's go into the source code for it. And most of this I'm actually just going to copy and paste over because of the fact that we have gone over the toolbar and the frame layout, and really there's nothing new here, but I will briefly discuss it. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that. So we have gone over ScrollViews before. There's a video on that. So all of it is just a scroll view with a whole bunch of text views inside of it. The image view is that Xamarin logo right here. That's the image view. And then all these text views, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, are just these things right here, okay? And then these are the things that are just scrolling and just allow it to scroll. So I just put a whole bunch of them so that we can actually get a scroll effect. And of course, it has to be inside of a single table layout, a scroll view. And then notice, here's the key point. Notice that we have the toolbar specified last. And remember in the last video, what we discovered was the fact that the order that we declare our views inside of the XML file are very much important for a frame layout. So the last view will always be on top, all right? And that's why we declare this last, because it has the highest Z index, therefore it will always be on top. And when we come over here to the design, we can see that here it is, the views, the scroll bar. This is our image view, which we're gonna have to import the image, of course, here since we don't have one yet. We'll go ahead and do that in a second. And then of course here, if we come over to our default theme, right now our theme is not going to show the toolbar, but we're going to have to change the theme, of course, here in a second, because the theme is very dependent on, or the toolbar is very dependent on what theme we do, because we want to make sure that we have a no action bar theme. All right, so now that we're almost done with the main XML, but let's first come over here, and we're going to need to set up the toolbar a little more, and that's with the styles. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to have a styles XML file. So we'll just call it styles. And if I'm losing you on this, guys, if you're following along, great. However, if I'm losing you, it's because we discussed all this in the last few videos about the toolbar. So be sure to check those ones out. I know I said it before, but you know, I don't want to lose you guys on this and be like, what's this guy talking about? He's crazy. He didn't mention any of this. So just make sure you go back and view those previous videos. But just in a gist, we are making a custom theme that inherits from the no action bar, because the toolbar, if you remember, cannot have an action bar because we're going to have the toolbar act as an action bar. And here we're just setting a few different colors for it. So now that we have this style, let's save it. What we can do is we can actually set it to the activity right here. And what we can do is we can say theme, and then we can do @style, okay, because it's in our style folder, and then we give it the style, which is called theme.mytheme. Alrighty. Now let's go ahead and save that. Let's come over to here, and we get a little bit of an error because, oh yeah, it was building. Okay, so this was being built, so this should be fine. And what we're going to need to do is pull up a theme. Let's hold off on that for a second because we're going to need to actually import the source for this image view. And now remember, the source can be really anything. I just happen to use the Xamarin logo, but you can really make it anything you like. So I'm going to go ahead and import the logo for this image view, which I'll make sure to include inside of the link in the project underneath this video. All right, so the logo has been added. I've put it inside of this folder right here, and then I've also added the overflow. And like I said, any source will of course work, but the project will have these drawables here in the download. Now the theme, if we change the theme to something that's a little bit more like our theme that we just created with the no action bar, we'll see that it changes it a little bit. And what's happening is that we're not seeing the toolbar here in the designer, but for some reason it's just not rendering it. If you are using the Visual Studio, you should be able to see the toolbar it's trying to render, and then you should see something that's a little more accurate. But here it's not looking like in Xamarin Studio that it's not really coming up as accurate. So if you don't see it, don't worry. It's when you run it, it should be there. So I'll just give you guys a little note on that. All right, so but the AXML is pretty much done, so we can go ahead and close out of that. And then we have our theme that's ready to go. And then the last thing that we really need is the code. So what's going to actually happen when we actually build this and run it? Okay, so let's first run it and without any code and just make sure it's working the way we expect it to, and see what's really going on with this. First, usually what I will have to do, which I have not yet in Xamarin Studio, is change the properties of the manifest. And we will do a minimum of 15. This looks okay. Go ahead and save that. All right, so it is running. And sometimes I'll have to come into the tools, Android devices, and then refresh. So we'll hit refresh, and then this should be compatible to Nexus 5. Let's go ahead and attempt to run it now. Sometimes there's some settings and some configurations that we'll have to set up before we really get a running project. So I like to go through these things, since if any of you guys are ever having this trouble, hopefully we can figure that out together. All right, so what I actually had to do was exit out of the emulator and then just restart it from Xamarin, and that kind of reconfigured it with it. Okay, so it wasn't working until I actually restarted the emulator, and then it was happy. All right, so if you guys are having that trouble, try that. All right, so it looks like here's what we have so far in our project. Now notice that we have our scroll and we have our image, but we have no action bar. So the only reason why that is because we haven't set the action bar, because our theme, remember, is saying to not put an action bar. So in code is where we actually have to set the support toolbar to be the action bar. And remember that what we need to do there is we need to inherit from action bar activity. And if we right click resolve, it's going to pull that from the new support library 7. And then now we'll have a access to a particular method called set support action bar. And notice that it takes the toolbar. That's no problem. So what we'll do is we'll make an instance of a toolbar. Let's first create an alias of it, since there's two different kind of toolbars, one in the support library and one not. So we'll call it using support toolbar equals Android support 7 toolbar. So whenever we use this, we're actually going to be meaning that. All right, so now we need to go into, remember, our layout, which is where we actually declared it. All right, looks like it crashed. And sometimes that happens. So let's go ahead and restart Xamarin Studio. All right. So, I mean, as you can see, it wasn't really doing anything special and it still crashed on me. So, I mean, that's just things that happen. So hopefully save your work very often, because you never really know, right? All right. So let's get back to where we were. Now, we were coming into the main XML file, and we have our toolbar, which we have named it toolbar. So let's go ahead and reference that inside of the CS file. So down here we'll do toolbar. Let's get rid of that for a second, since it's trying to compile or something. This is going to be a support toolbar, and then resource ID toolbar. And then we'll use that method that we spoke of a few seconds ago called set support ActionBar, and then it wants a toolbar, which will feed it our toolbar. Now if we go ahead and run this, what we should get is a action bar. And there it is right there. So there's our action bar, and notice that all it says is toolbar overlay bar. So we still need the menu, remember, for the overflow, but that's simple enough to do. Now notice that it's fully transparent because of the fact that we made it that way inside of our AXML file. So we set it to by default be transparent, which is the 00, the alpha. Okay. Now, so let's come over here now, and let's go ahead, and we're going to need to get a reference to the actual scroll view so that we can set up a listener that will scroll when the scrolling happens, and then we can actually change the look of it. All right. Now, the way we do that, of course, is we'll do ScrollView, and then we'll call it ScrollView, and let's go ahead and get an instance of that. All right, so we got an instance of our scroll view. Now what we could do to actually get the instance of it is, to set up the listener, is we could do mScrollView, and we can use view tree observer, and then we'll say add on scroll change listener, and we'll just pass it this, since we will actually now implement the on scroll listener. Okay. So we come over here, if we do view tree observer dot I on scroll change listener, and then all we'll need to do is actually just implement it. So we'll just do the find. Not sure if that's going to work for me. It's okay. So we'll actually have to come into here, and then we'll go ahead and we'll actually just implement that. So what it is called is on scroll change, no parameters. So this guy gets called whenever the actual scrolling happens on the scroll view. All right. So just keep that in mind. Now let's go ahead and make a method. We're going to make a function called get opacity, and the opacity is going to change as the user scrolls, right? So, and depending on where and how much. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually get the screen size of it, and then halfway through what we'll go ahead and do about halfway through is when it'll actually be fully visible. So halfway through the screen, so about right here, when the user scrolls to about this point, it should be fully visible. And you can change this value however you like, but I'm just going to go with halfway, about half the distance of the actual screen size. So to get the screen size of it, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need a point. And what we can do here is we actually set up a float value, or actually will actually be an int value, and let's just call it screen height, so that we can get the height of the actual screen, since of course that always varies for each device. And then inside of here, after we let's do it before we set the listener, we'll go ahead and get the actual size of the screen that we're dealing with. Let's import the Android graphics equals new point, and then we'll use display, and then we'll need the window manager, and then we'll need default display. So that'll get the actual default display. And then what we can do, guys, is we can just pass in our point that we just created with the get size method. So we'll say get size, get the size of the screen, and then from then on there we can actually just call upon that the display, and then we'll do Y for the height. And if we ever wanted the width, we could do X. But we only want the height right now. So this will get the height of the screen. And let's go ahead and make a constant variable. And remember I said that we want for it to be fully visible as the user scrolls half the distance of the screen. So let's make a constant int called fully visible at, and I'll put 2 for half. So maybe if it's like 4, it'll be a quarter and all that. So 2 just represents just that the halfway through the screen it's going to be fully visible. Now let's come back into our function get opacity, and we're going to say fully visible at px for pixels, and then we're going to get the actual mark of when it's actually fully visible at. So we'll get the screen height divided by fully visible at, which is 2 in this case right now. So this will get the middle of our screen. So somewhere around here it'll get that point. So it knows that at that point in pixels it will be fully visible. So now that we have that point, we'll need to set the alpha, which the alpha is just what handles the transparency. Right now it's fully transparent because the alpha is set to 0. So as it increases, it'll become more less transparent and more visible. So we'll do mScrollView scroll Y, and this will give us the current position and the current Y position of the scroll. So how much has the user scrolled down, and then fully visible at px. All right. So let's go through a scenario. Say if it's 0, your user has not scrolled at all. 0 divided by, say, if this is like 400 or something, it'll be 0. It'll still be, the alpha will still be 0. But if this is scroll Y 200, say, they have scrolled 200 pixels, and we want it to be fully visible at 400, then 200 divided by 400 is, of course, 0.5. Therefore, alpha will be 0.5. So it'll be halfway between fully transparent and fully visible. So it'll give that fade effect. And then, of course, if it's 400 divided by 400, this will be 1. And then at that point, it will be fully visible, because once the alpha is arranged from 0 to 1, 0 being transparent and 1 being fully visible. And then because this is being called many, many times per second, it's going to give us a nice fade in animation and that really nice fade in and out. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish this up. And now sometimes just to make it, just to regulate it, sometimes it will go out of bounds. And remember I said that the alpha will always be a value from 0 to 1. So we'll say if it's greater than 1, then return 1, because we don't want it to be greater than 1. That doesn't really make sense for alpha values. And if it's less than 0, we'll return 0. There it is right there. Because remember that this is returning a float. Otherwise, we want to return the current value, which is going to be guaranteed between 0 and 1. or 0 and 1, including 0 and 1, and then fully visible at. So we'll do the same exact thing right here. All right, so what we could do, just to make it if it's more clear for you, that'll work as well. So this is going to be called constantly, and then now onScroll changed. Actually, this will be called constantly, and we're going to be calling this method constantly as much as this is called, because this is where we'll call it from. We'll do mToolbar set background color, and then we'll set the color. So we'll use color, and then we'll set alpha RGB. So we'll need 4 values: alpha, red, green, and blue. And the first one, of course, is going to be the alpha. So let's first cast it to an integer. That'll get the opacity, the current opacity that the toolbar should be at. And then because the opacity needs to be a value from 0 to 255, because in this value it's going to be a value from 0 to 255, but we're actually getting a float value from like 0 to 1. So it's actually a ratio, and that's fine. What we can do here in that case is times it by 255, because we know 0 to 255 is going to be the values, the alpha, the red, green, and blue are from values of 0 to 255. And then of course we're going to make it red, so fully red, and then 0 and 0, because we don't want any green or any blue. And of course this can be any color you guys want, guys. I'm just using red as an example. And one more paren, and there we go. So this gets called over and over again very often as the user is scrolling. And then the last thing we need to do, which really isn't much a part of this tutorial, but just to make it complete, we'll need the onCreate options menu, which is going to inflate the menu that we are going to create right now. That gives us that overview. But because I had it in there, I don't want to leave you guys hanging on that. So what we'll do is resource menu action underscore menu, pass it the menu. We've done this 1,000 times, right? And this isn't this is going to give us an error, of course, because this doesn't exist yet. So what I'll do is I'll add a new folder to our resources folder, call up menu lowercase m, and new file, and then what we'll call it is action underscore menu. And then of course, just for brevity and the fact that we've gone over this many times, I'll go ahead and just copy and paste it over. And all this is doing, guys, is simply adding the overflow icon, or I'm sorry, the overflow icon to the action bar, which we have in here. And that's all that's doing. Let's go ahead and save it. All right, so let's go ahead and run this and see if it's working properly. Now notice that we're going to have our menu, our overflow, and then the toolbar is going to be fully transparent. And it does look like something's the matter with the toolbar. It doesn't give you that clean fade in. And my guess would be that the parentheses in this expression are not lining up. So this is actually going to need to be cast, or to be evaluated and then cast to an integer. Let's pull this back up. So what was happening before was actually getting the value from get opacity, casting it, which was either a 0 or a 1, and then times it by 255. So it was the extreme of the other, one or the other, either fully visible or fully transparent. And that looks like that fixed that problem. So now, as you can see, now we're getting that clean transition, and we can scroll all the way to the bottom as much as we want. It'll always be coming back at that point. So halfway through, it's fully visible. Notice that it's still not quite, because we can still see that view. And then right here, it is fully visible as we cannot see it. Alrighty, guys. So there you go. That's how to use a frame layout with a toolbar. The toolbar being overlaid in the frame layout on the last child to make it the highest Z index, and therefore it's overlaying. And then we give it just some quick code to make it come into visibility when the user scrolls in a scroll view. And you should be able to do this similarly with any sort of other scroll view, not just any not just the scroll view, but like a list view, a recycler view. So as long as you can get the scroll Y and do this arithmetic, then you'll be able to get the proper way to fade it in and out. All right, guys. So as always, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please do thumbs up. It helps my videos grow. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Really appreciate it. It helps my channel grow. And as always, thanks for watching, guys.